Last week's topic on the ideals of women's appearance brought out questions around choice or victimization of women, and the extent to which Western body ideals of thinness or leanness stem from the continued objectification of women, which in turn have perpetuated women's self-objectification, resulting in body shame or body dissatisfaction. This week's topic on the veiling of women continues our focus on women's appearance, grounding our work more on questions surrounding culture or religion as a source of women's oppression. Complicating our work is the post-9/11 environment and the subsequent Western attention paid to the veiling of Muslim women. To what extent do Muslim women choose to wear the veil? Or is the veil a prime example not only of the oppression of Muslim women, but also of their sexual repression? Is the desire to dress modestly and cover oneself, either in part or wholly, a symbol of women's subordination to men, including the curtailment of their sexual freedoms? Or is it an act of resistance to Western hegemony, to the objectification of women's bodies, and to post-9/11 Islamophobia? Given that the way women dress can accentuate their bodies, appearing sexy and inviting of attention, even if that attention is unwanted, is there value to covering up and dressing modestly to prevent the objectification of women? Or is placing the onus on women's dress or appearance yet another example of women being blamed for male-dominated attitudes that pervade in society? The complexity of women's dress is aptly captured in this cartoon. I like this cartoon because it brings out that the problem is not one of cultural differences, but rather of male-dominated attitudes about women's dress and the extent to which women are made to conform to patriarchal constructions of what women should look like and how they should dress. This is in contrast to dominant views in the Western world today, where the focus is on cultural or religious differences. In this case, Muslim women are seen as oppressed, where they are forced to cover up and therefore cannot exercise choice in their decisions, unlike, as the argument goes, women in the West who are seen as making choices, in this case in terms of how they dress. Western women can choose to cover up, or not, and be as scantily clothed as they want, including wearing even the skimpiest of bikinis. Indeed, for many Muslim women in these forced situations, what they have available to them, it is argued, is likely a burkini. And because it is a play on the word burqa, it conjures up images of Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, where the iconic images of burqa-wearing oppressed women help to justify Western intervention, not merely to root out al-Qaeda in the wake of 9/11, but also to liberate or save Afghan women. Burqas, of course, are but one example, and arguably the most extreme, of the veiling of Muslim women. There are others. BBC News has graphics to illustrate the different types of veils worn by Muslim women, and it is important to understand the differences. As we can see, the burqa is the most concealing of all Islamic veils, covering the entire face and body and leaving just a mesh screen for women to see through. Although the niqab allows the area around the eyes clear, it is also a concealing garment. As BBC News highlights, the burqa and the niqab are the types of veils banned, or under consideration to be banned, in many European countries, the most notable being France. Canada, too, has weighed in. First, when the Quebec government introduced Bill 94 in 2010, which would require all individuals to show their faces when seeking government services, and in December 2011, when the federal government placed a ban on face coverings, such as niqabs, for individuals swearing their oath of citizenship. As Citizenship and Immigration Minister Jason Kenney told CBC News, illustrating the federal government's position on the veiling of Muslim women, "The religious obligation to wear a veil is a cultural tradition," he said, "which I think reflects a certain view about women that we don't accept in Canada. We want women to be full and equal members of Canadian society, and certainly when they're taking the citizenship oath, that's the right place to start." There are other types of veils, such as the khimar and the chador, that do not conceal women's faces. According to BBC News, the khimar is a long cape-like veil that hangs down to just above the waist. It covers the hair, neck, and shoulders completely, but leaves the face clear. The chador, worn by many Iranian women when outside the house, is a full-body cloak. It is often accompanied by a smaller headscarf underneath. There are still other types of veils that are principally head coverings. According to BBC News, the al-amira is a two-piece veil. It consists of a close-fitting cap, usually made from cotton or polyester, and an accompanying tube-like scarf. The shaila is a long rectangular scarf popular in the Gulf region. It is wrapped around the head and tucked or pinned in place at the shoulders. Finally, there is the hijab. This is the type of veil most commonly worn by Muslim women in the West, and it is a square scarf that covers the head and neck but leaves the face clear. Regarded by many Muslims as a symbol of both religion and womanhood, it comes in a myriad of styles and colors. The word hijab comes from the Arabic for veil. I too have consciously worn a scarf or veil as a Muslim woman would, and that is when I visited the famous Blue Mosque, or more correctly the Sultan Ahmed Mosque in Istanbul, Turkey a few years ago. I wore a scarf to cover my head, not only because women were asked to do so in visiting the mosque, but also because it was an appropriate act of cultural or religious deference, even though I am not a Muslim, or for that matter, religious. This brings up an important starting point for our work on this module. Western feminists have long argued that all religions are oppressive of women, and that religion and gender equality are fundamentally incompatible. A key question for us to ask is, to what extent do religious ideas and or practices undermine women's rights? Why do Muslim women wear the veil? What does the veil signify? What limits might reasonably be placed upon religious activities in a pluralistic society? Are the bans in veiling, as in France, reasonable limits, or are they discriminatory? In addition, to what extent has the female Muslim body been eroticized and thus transformed into the object of a voyeuristic gaze? As one scholar has argued, the veil actually heightens men's fantasies about women, because the more that is hidden or concealed, the greater the spur to the imagination of the viewer. These are the kinds of questions that we will be addressing in this module. I've asked you to do 2 readings this week. One is by Sirma Blaj, looking at the reasons why Muslim women wear the veil. And the other is by Martha Nussbaum, who explores whether laws that ban veiling constitute reasonable limits, or whether they are discriminatory. This short piece by Nussbaum is not found in your textbook, but she has a recent book entitled The New Religious Intolerance, Overcoming the Politics of Fear in an Anxious Age, which builds on her arguments from this piece that I've asked you to read. I have 4 primary goals in this module. First, I want you to assess whether religious ideas and or practices undermine women's rights. Islam is not alone in being seen as incompatible with gender equality. The argument made by many feminists is that all religions are male-dominated institutions and that progressive secularism demands that religion be properly relegated to the private sphere, not the public domain. Second, I want you to examine the reasons why Muslim women wear the veil and why this has become particularly contentious in the post-9/11 environment. Third, I want you to consider whether bans on veiling in a number of Western countries, such as France, and more recently in Canada, with the decision to ban the niqab or burqa in citizenship ceremonies, are in fact discriminatory against Muslim women. Fourth, I want you to explore Western conceptions of the veil today as sexually repressive, when interestingly enough, the veil has historically been seen as highly erotic. Our work on the veiling of women, focusing on Muslim women, demands thoughtful and reflective considerations, particularly in the post-9/11 environment. And I look forward to class discussion and reflections on these issues.